Well, there are 4 phases in the off-season: winter workouts, spring practice, summer conditioning, and preseason. 2 of them are already in the books.
I'm in another phase here. I'm taking Trey Bauer's seat. I'm going to try to do this thing justice, and we'll see how it goes today.
Oh, I think you're going to be just fine. In fact, we've already endorsed you. How many shows can you do this year? The Blue-White Pulse is next. Welcome everyone to the Blue-White Pulse. It's great to have you with us, and Jay Paterno joining us this time around, and our guest analyst this time around from Fight on State, Mark Brennan. Mark, welcome. Great to have you on set with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Love the show and happy to be part of it.
All right, so let's talk about spring football is in the books. So what did we learn? And that's exactly that's exactly what I was expecting.
Well, you know, it's hard to really know. I mean, you look at the blue-white game, and you get there's some things you can take away from it, but without having been to practice, you don't really know necessarily how many things have improved. But nobody got hurt. It looked like there's some more depth on this football team, and it looks like they've made some great strides.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumped out to me, Steve, the little chance that we had to see practice as the media, the offense this year looks so much quicker. It was almost like the quarterbacks even looked faster. And I don't know that they were faster, but I think the second year in Joe Mo's offense, everybody just has a great feel for things. So when we were there, it's like bam, 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 whereas opposed to last year, and even in the preseason, the first couple games last year, that offense was really, struggling's not the right word, but they were learning. And I think this spring, the one thing that jumped out to me was how much more efficient that offense looked.
And what did James Franklin think of how the spring went?
Overall, I thought spring practice went well. I'm more concerned, to be honest with you, about the 13 practices rather than the blue-white game in the scrimmage. So I thought we really accomplished our goals. We were able to develop some depth, get a bunch of reps for some guys that maybe normally don't get reps.
So let's talk about the blue-white game for a moment. That's the one where there was a big exposure to watching the football team. So pro and con, what did you say?
Well, I think the one thing that's unique is that they're letting the defense do a lot of things blitz-wise and come after them.
Jay, they didn't use cover 3?
No, and you know what? There's a method to the madness because, you know, the defense did a really good job, I thought, against the first offense when Trace McSorley was in there. They had trouble moving the ball and they had some turnovers. And your hope is that you don't expose necessarily some things that might be weaknesses, because if I'm getting ready to play Penn State, I'm going to pull that film out and say, well, Brent sees these guys in practice every day. These are things he's calling. He might know a couple things. Hopefully not.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to see, and maybe we will as the program develops more depth, is to have a more equitable distribution of the talent in that game. And I understand where they're coming from. Listen, if somebody were to get hurt in that game, I would be the first one ripping them over it. But it would be fun. And I think, you know, when you're asking 70, 80, 90,000 people to show up, I would love to see the teams a little bit more balanced, because you look at the stats from that game and they were really lopsided for the one team. So I would like to see that. That's what makes it very difficult to take a whole lot out of that game per se for me.
Still a fun day for the fans, though. I mean, it gets them in. There's so many kids I saw at that game. Those are your future fans right there. And I always think that this is one of the more productive parts of the spring.
Well, there's always pressure when you look at all those people in there as an administrator to say, can we make money out of this? Why don't we charge for the game? And I think that's a big mistake if they go that route.
Right, which they
I didn't even like the fact that they charge for parking, because you're going to lose money on this game, but it's a seeding process. Yeah. Kids that get to see McSorley in person for the first time, they're going to remember that 15 years down the road and be fans.
Right. Coming up, well, we've already touched a little bit on the offense to this point. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on the offense as we continue with Blue-White Pulse after this. Welcome back to Blue-White Pulse. Steve Jones, Jay Paterno, Mark Brennan. Great to have you with us on the show today. So let's talk about the offense. I thought Mark made a really good point. Continuity and coordinators, now they have that. What difference do you think it made actually on both sides of the ball? Because Brent Pry has his own way of doing things, Mark.
Well, I mean, especially on offense, as I mentioned, I just thought everything was a lot more efficient. But defensively, you look over, you can see where now they're able to kind of bring guys along and slot them where you're losing players. And I know we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but it's more of again, a lot of it goes back to the depth. And all of a sudden, we're seeing a Koa Farmer step in at that field linebacker spot, or you're seeing the kid step in at defensive end. Right. There's a continuity there that when you were going through so many different head coaches and coordinators over a couple years, it was difficult to find.
All right, let's get to Tommy Stevens. I mean, Jay, some real numbers that he put up in the Blue-White game. Now, look, I mean, Pat Devlin put up some awesome numbers in one of your Blue-White games, and Darrell Clark was your starter. Okay, and that was when the competition was going on. That was 2008. But still, what did you see in his performance?
Well, you know, in the times he played in games last year, I was impressed with some of the things he was able to do and the command he had, and he seems to have a good, you know, I'm not a practice every day, but he's a guy that on Saturday, you saw him make one of the better throws that you've seen really in any game. He hit that one deep one down the sideline, on the line, led him a little bit out of bounds. But I think if something were to happen, Trace McSorley, God forbid, hopefully it doesn't, I would feel pretty comfortable with him going in there and playing.
In today's game, with so many people running so many spread offenses, Mark, what's the importance of making sure you've got two really good ones?
Well, and I think the other thing people have to remember is Trace McSorley, as tough and gritty and all of those things as he is not the biggest guy. No. And I think they maybe were a little bit lucky last year. And, you know, knock on wood, I hope he stays healthy in every single game.
Yeah, the one game was the Indiana game.
Right, he got bumped up a little bit. But as Jay mentioned, you know, every time we saw Tommy Stevens last year, he looked good. And I think that's important. The other thing about Tommy Stevens, I think people forget, this kid is 6'4" and a good 220 plus. I mean, he came in here as a skinny kid. This is a man now. Yeah. And he's ready. You know, I think they're in a great spot. If McSorley gets hurt, I mean, clearly McSorley's the guy. I don't care what anybody says. But if they get into a tough spot where he's bumped up, I think they're going to be completely fine with Stevens coming in.
Jay, what does it take in a quarterback room in talking to or being around and judging body language of the person that's not number one?
Well, I think that's everything, because the rest of the team looks at that guy. If you're the number two guy, everybody wants to see how you're acting, how you're behaving. Are you buying in? Are you giving everything you have? And knowing some of the guys on the team that have talked about Tommy over the time he's been here, I mean, he's been that kind of all-in guy, and I think that's vital. And I think that, you know, like Mark said, if he gets in there, I don't think Penn State fans have much to worry about. I think he's got, and he, like I said, he is a big man.
Chris Godwin put together a really good career here at Penn State, no question. The Rose Bowl, he was outstanding. But the Big Ten championship game, Blacknall and Hamilton were the two guys that really stepped up. What about replacing him?
Well, I don't think you replace one. I don't even think one person replaces him. Everybody, everything you read online and all these preseason stuff, who's going to replace Godwin? And I don't think that's the case. I think they have so much depth at receiver, and I keep going back to depth, but it's true. It's so much different when you go years with only having 65 scholarships or whatever it is. Now all of a sudden you have 85. You're starting to see the depth. So it's not only the guys you mentioned, Steve. It's the Jawan Johnsons, Irvin Charles. I mean, those kind of guys who played a little bit last year. To me, especially Jawan Johnson, he has a chance to really step up. But my whole thing is they have great depth there. You have Gesicki, a great tight end. Yeah. They are going to be fine catching the ball, even losing a guy like Godwin.
Let's go up front now. Connor McGovern feels that the offensive line made strides during the course of the spring.
Definitely, we're getting closer than we were last year. Every day we're coming out getting better. Definitely, we're not there yet, but we're going to be there by the fall.
Well, and this is where the depth comes back in. If there are two areas in the football team. Well, let's go three because of the kicking game. That was walk-ons for a while. Linebacker and offensive line were probably the two, Jay, which numbers-wise got hit because of the sanctions. What have you seen in the development of this offensive line and some of the depth they've been able to get to?
Well, a couple things that have happened. Everybody talked about the number of sacks going down last year. And part of that was the offensive line. Part of that is with mobile quarterbacks. Sure. You're going to have less sacks. There were a lot of times Trace got him out of some trouble. The thing that you want to see is more consistency week to week, and I think that's something that they've got to get to, because the run game, one game they look phenomenal, the next game against Indiana they struggle most of the game. So I think until you see them really come in week after week and dominate up front and be able to run the ball like they want to run it when they want to control the clock, and in a third down situation. I think that's what they've got to get to, and they're making strides that way. I think there's no question.
And there's more depth there. I mean, we saw Mike Miranda play the guard spot. A wild card, though, Mark, would have to be Andrew Nelson in all this.
Well, yeah. I mean, the guy blows out his knee again last year. You wonder when he's going to come back. And, you know, we were talking a little bit before the show. That's a guy who, if and when he does come back, and I assume he will, I mean, you hope he will for his sake, because he's been a great player for this program, you could really slot him just about anywhere on that line outside of center, and I would imagine you may put him in guard. And one other thing I'd like to point out, Steve, we saw that picture of Connor McGovern being interviewed. You're starting to see now these guys come in, and in 1 year, we saw it with Bates, and now we see it with McGovern, going through a physical transformation where they just look like different human beings, and that's part of the whole development of that O-line, too.
And part of that, too, is a guy like Saquon Barkley. They get to block for a guy like him. There's obviously going to be a lot of hype about him, but he seems like, you know, Kajana Carter was the kind of guy that kept things on an even keel. Saquon seems to be the same kind of guy.
Absolutely seems to be. You know, every time you see him in public, he handles himself so well.
You bet.
And you know, I think he's gonna need that this year. Gonna need that.
No question. All right. We're going to transition. We touched a little bit with Mark in the beginning of this segment about the Penn State defense, but we're going to a little bit more in depth on that. Then in the final segment, we'll talk about some of the big picture issues as well as the Blue-White Pulse continues after this. Welcome back to Blue-White Pulse. Steve Jones, Jay Paterno, Mark Brennan. Great to have you with us. In the previous segment, I did touch on the defense a bit with Mark and got the ball rolling in that direction. Let's get to the defensive front because actually a year ago at this time, remember, they had to replace Zettel, they had to replace Johnson. What do you think about the defensive front now? Because now it's moved out to the flanks. It's the ends.
Well, pass rush is important. I mean, everybody will tell you, anybody that knows anything about football will tell you, if you don't get the best pass defense is a pass rush. But I think you saw some in the spring game. They were able to get up the field. Looks like they have some good depth there, some good speed there. But, you know, until you get into live fire, we won't necessarily know what we got.
Mark, what's interesting, we talked about the depth. This is where it comes into play, I think, a little bit. We're going to talk about Sharif Miller in a moment, but they were able to, quote, break him into the lineup in a rotation so that when he plays, he's been out there before.
Well, yeah, and it's going to be the same thing this year, I think, with guys like Shaka Toney and Shane Simmons, where they're going to be able to bring these younger guys along. But, yeah, I mean, Sharif Miller is a guy who you look at him now, I mean, 6'5", 265 pounds, whatever he is. You know, we talk about men playing this game. This is a guy who's come into the program and is going to be, to me, I think, a dominant force. And don't sleep on Torrance Brown. I mean, this is a super athletic kid out on that edge. And, you know, another guy, Buck Holtz, could play inside or outside. They've gotten to the point, I keep hammering depth, depth, depth. You know, inside, Steve, now, and outside, they have just phenomenal depth up front under Coach Chaos.
And what's happened with that is it's allowed them to go to a 4 defensive end package on 3rd and obvious, like Ohio State has done. And Penn State and Ohio State really were the 2 programs, I think, above anybody in the country that went to that package and used it effectively last year with the 4 defensive end package on 3rd and forever. Sharif Miller brought up in that conversation. Brent Pry knows he's made great strides.
Sharif's a young guy with so much promise and talent. We saw that last fall. We saw that this year. Like Kevin, he's still growing into the position. He's learning the position. He's beginning to trust techniques, trust his reads. We still got some work to do there.
You want to be good up the middle, and with you want to have the 2 defensive tackles, middle linebacker, they've got Kabinda, and then Brandon Smith behind him, 2 seniors, and then the 2 safeties. How do you feel that this is evolving as a defense?
Well, I mean, I think it all starts with the defensive tackles. I mean, Brent Pry mentioned Givens, you have Cawthron, you have Windsor. I'm sure I'm missing people. I mean, they just have so many defensive tackles now that's a great spot for them. I agree with you about linebacker. One of those blessing in disguises last year. You never want to see someone injured, but Brandon Smith not only played, but played extremely well. And then back there at safety, I think they're going to be fine. Marcus Allen, Apke's played a lot of football. You have some younger kids who are going to come. So I think right up the gut, they're going to be good.
It's interesting because your father many, many years ago took Andre Collins as a safety and made him an outside linebacker. He really started that trend of, okay, if you've got the frame, we can put you closer to the line of scrimmage. When you look at Farmer, not necessarily, but, you know, Bowen has a great burst, but Farmer's a guy that played safety, now is playing outside. Jarvis Miller's safety, now playing outside. What are you seeing from those guys?
Well, I think the biggest thing that in the way the game has evolved with all the spread offense that you're going to see, you're going to see from Ohio State, you're going to see from Indiana, you're going to see a number of these teams. You're essentially playing with 5 defensive backs every snap anyway. So these guys that you're moving up, having that safety experience, and when you play safety, you learn the entire defense more so than anybody else. You see their reactions have been very good. They've made big, Coe has made some big plays in some big games, and his reaction is good. He's got great speed. He brings a different speed level, and he's really grown into you know, I don't know how much weight he's put on since he got here, but just from looking at him, it certainly looks like he's a different person.
Yeah, player development. I mean, Mark, you want to see progress from year to year. What progress did you see in player development on the side of the ball?
In the spring, I mean, Koa Farmer was a guy who was kind of a specialty player last year. They used him to blitz the quarterback a lot. When he had to start in the Rose Bowl, he struggled a little bit. And I think when you saw him out there this spring, he just looked a little bit more comfortable. He looked like he was just felt better about himself. And I think overall, Stephen, you know, I'll go back to the job they've done with the strength training. You had mentioned how much weight Koa Farmer has put on, and it's good weight. He's maintained his speed. He's up to what, 240, 35, you know, 40 pounds or something like that now. So the fact that they're able to get these guys bigger and maintain their speed is key.
And that's important. He's actually, his 40 time is actually a little bit quicker than it was before. And the fact that he's a two-way linebacker now, because he's played the pass, helps.
Oh, no question. I mean, like I said, the spread stuff, there's so much stuff going on the line of scrimmage, and if you can show that you're playing run and have a guy who's ability to get out there and get underneath the pass, that makes a big difference. And all that stuff, look at the sidelines, you know, you're showing them a pass situation, and you know, you got to play the run and vice versa. So having a guy that's been around that's got some brains and got the ability to do both is huge.
Yeah, big part of it. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the Blue-White Pulse with the D block, not G, after this. Well, the NFL draft has come and gone. One Nittany Lion taken. That was Chris Godwin in the 3rd round by the Tampa Bay Bucks. But as you can see, several others have signed their contracts. Garrett Sickles with the Colts, Evan Schwan with the Giants, Brandon Bell with the Bengals, Malik Golden with the Niners. Tyler Yazian is going to get a look by the Detroit Lions as a long snapper who didn't feel compelled to draft one.
Nice. Shot at the Steelers.
Exactly.
Just a little bit across the bow. It's all right.
Hey, yeah, but if you lose a game because of a bad snap, your fans will be, you know what.
Hey, remember, Tony Romo, Seattle, mishandling a hold. People never forgot that.
No.
All right, the Giants had a bad long snap at a playoff game.
Yes, I know.
Yep, so, okay. So beyond that, now that we've defended the Steeler draft, which we didn't have to, in years to come, this is going to be different. And this goes back, Mark, to the point you've made repeatedly in this show, is like, look, they've built the program back because they've had the numbers to do it, and they've chosen wisely.
Well, yeah, I mean, people look at the draft and they're like, oh my God, Penn State only had one guy drafted, nobody in the first 2 rounds. And I tweeted during the draft,
how many did you expect?
Penn State was the only top 10 team that didn't have anybody drafted in the top 2 rounds. What is that telling you?
That's good.
They have a little bit of talent coming back.
and so
it's
a young team.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, everybody grew. I think it was after the 04 season. I think we went without a guy drafted.
Yeah.
And people went nuts, and the next year we went 11-1. So you know, it's good, but it's bad.
Well, ESPN kept putting up the, this team has had, Temple's had a guy drafted, Lehigh's, whatever. And it's like, what, are you missing the point here that they have a ton of talent coming back?
They miss a lot of points. Okay, now let's get some big picture stuff. It's interesting in this draft when we go back to a lot of people hand-wringing. Leonard Fournette not going to play bowl game. McCaffrey not going to play a bowl game. Went 4 and 8 respectively. Jake Butt did play the bowl game, and Jake Butt, like Smith the year before, gets hurt and ends up in the 3rd day. How tough is this decision? And from a coach's point of view, how do you look at it?
Well, from a coach's point of view, I mean, you want your guys to go on to the NFL. You know, when you go out and recruit, you see every school is tweeting every guy they get drafted.
Right.
And so you're selling them on that. And if you don't want them to have that eye towards the NFL, then stop selling them on that as your main recruiting point. So, you know, if you tell me I'm going to play in the Sun Bowl, but I'm a potential #1 pick, you know, I'm an old school guy. I'd play it because I want to play, but I also understand there's a business decision. If you're dinged up, you know, I understand both sides of it.
Yeah, Jake Butt is going to be the cautionary tale that everybody points to. In the meantime, Jabril Peppers, you know, has all these issues, doesn't play in the bowl, and still goes really high.
Right, exactly right. Now the next part is, should it stay or should it go? Jay, we're going to go cards on the sideline. You see every team with cards on the sideline, 4 blocks.
Giant cards, and they look like arts and crafts projects like I did in elementary school. But no, they got to go only because the big donors all sit in the lower rows, you know, the ones that aren't in the boxes, and you're blocking their view. So they should probably go because somebody's going to complain.
I want to go to his elementary school. I never did that sort of thing.
Maybe in middle school.
Yeah.
Preseason polls, of course, one thing I'll say about preseason polls is this. It does give you a starting position. And now, college football is the only one that gives you a starting position. That's the only thing out of it that I see in it that's a pro or a con.
Well, especially now that they come, you know, midway through the season with the actual poll that matters, and that's where, you know, Penn State, you know, Exhibit A last year. Would anybody have had them remotely close to the top 10? You know, where they finished.
Right. All right. Part of the lure of this year's, I use this loosely,
Nice.
lure of this year's Blue-White game was the media punt competition. We now have highlights. There you are. You're right there in that group.
I think you fortunately left me out here. I don't know.
Wait, did somebody have a GoPro camera on there?
Yep.
Yep.
People had spikes. People had gloves.
Andrew Callis.
Okay, now that I've seen that, that's got to go next year. That
Andrew
should go.
caught one.
Andrew caught 2.
Yeah.
Andrew caught 2.
See what I'm saying? I mean, gloves.
First of all, look where his hands are.
Thomas
Get
Frank
your hands together.
Carrs, yeah. I mean, Thomas Frank Carr caught that one there, and
Thank you, John, for not putting me in there. I appreciate that because I didn't come close.
I think that's part of being the guest. You know, by being the guest,
You get some hospitality. Yeah.
I don't get insulted.
You just get a little more consideration than others, right? We also had a long list of people that we really wanted to put in there. No, just kidding.
Actual celebrities. Yeah.
So, all right. So here we are. We get to this part. Now it's going to be the next part, and that's, you just talked about how it goes in four phases. The next phase is going to be the summer phase. June's a big month for strength and conditioning. Lift for Life comes up in July as well. Mark, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I love it, Jay, Steve.
Jay, great to have you as well. Thanks for joining us today on the Blue-White Pulse.